way, Mal, and think on that. Let us also look at another incident that is taking place, and maybe many Kenyans may not be paying much interest, but I think it is something that needs to be raised. And Kenya has argued both in court and outside on a case, and this is to do with Somalia. And we remember that not too long ago, we had Somalia go to the ICJ. Or was it Kenya that went to the ICJ? Somalia that went to the ICJ to try and stop what Somalia was doing. And on top of that, we also have Somalia who had gone to the UK, or rather who are auctioning some parts which were still under contention. And maybe, Brian, since this is your neck of the woods, just bring up to speed to where we are now.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think people have been asking me, what is the difference between ICJ and ICC? Because there's a thin line. I want to put it rightly this way, that ICJ handles matters between states, and it treats states as international law persons, while ICC goes for the culpability of individuals who have the highest, role in terms of a responsibility of a breach of matters of genocide, war crimes, and so on and so on. But it's unfortunate that we have found ourselves in a tiff between with us and Somalia, whom we have experienced such kind of good mutual bilateral relationship for quite some time. And our symbiotic relationship with Somalia, of course, in terms of trade and cooperation, is something that we cannot wish away, that simply. But having found ourselves in this kind of quagmire with Somalia, having been taken to the ICJ for a determination of a matter of international nature, we need to ask ourselves who is actually likely to win in this case. I will tell you it's a very tough one for Kenya as of now, looking at the merits and the demerits of this case, and owing to the kind of evidences that have already been tabled, and also owing to the rulings that the ICJ had done previously in 2014 in a matter that they were handling to give way to now where we are today, because it takes some stages. I want to say that the disputed maritime zone is of course, we cannot underestimate its economic value, and Somalia has gone ahead to, auction it, or to, advertise for auctioneers to buy it. And I want to say that by the development that we saw yesterday, where Parliament actually moved with speed to ensure that they enact or they pave way for military deployment in that particular area, to me, is a political sort of solution that they are trying to apply. Because this is a matter that is already within the jurisdiction of the ICJ, pending determination actually in the coming September. What I understand is that Kenya will contravene some certain provisions of the UN, where when it deploys, military sort of personnel within that disputed region. But again, they can also argue that Somalia is also doing the same, because it has gone ahead to auction this area when the matter is already being handled by the ICJ. Okay. So by going forward, I think the new development that Duale and Bandi yesterday took, I think first of all, it's a political sort of undertaking that will have little overbearing within the works of the ICJ, because this being a municipal law that they are trying to bring about cannot have any overbearing within the international arena when it comes to international law application. So whatever domestic laws that you make sometimes might not affect what the international overbearings have.
Okay, Mark, what is Kenya saying? If the MPs is anything to go by, what is Kenya saying in regards to what ICJ is doing or what they would pronounce? Are we saying that, well, ICJ, we really don't care what you have to say, we're going to go ahead and do what we need to do?
Probably, Michael, without disrupting what Mark is about to say, maybe just to put this in perspective, that nations that appear before the ICJ are nations that have already submitted to this ICJ voluntarily. And Kenya did this in 1964, and they cannot bolt out of it because they appended their signature as a member of the UN. And therefore, ICJ being the principal judicial organ of the UN, they have no way that they can back out of it.
Okay.
Well, there's a number of things. First, let's remember that both ICC and ICJ have run roughshod of Kenya a number of times. And we need to understand and broadly situate the situation. First, Kenya has a horizontal border between Kenya and Tanzania. The reason being that if we did an equidistant border like Somalia is suggesting, we would be talking about getting parts of Zanzibar and Pemba Island, which would basically create conflict between us and Tanzania. Therefore, if you look at the Indian Ocean side of Africa, you will notice that all the lines that have been negotiated have all been horizontal. Somalia is the only one that wants an equidistant border. Now, the reason why equidistant seems popular is because the ICJ in many of its rulings has ruled equidistant. But in the case of Kenya and Somalia, this is extremely unfair. Number one, it will make Kenya effectively landlocked. Why? Because if you draw those lines, it means that any ship coming into Kenya will have to seek permission either from Tanzania or Somalia to get into Kenya, meaning they'll be charged there, meaning whatever it is that we're importing and exporting in this country will be more expensive. Number two, we are talking about an area where there is a lot of oil deposits, and Brian has talked about it. But also, if you draw an equidistant line, you are also saying that Al-Shabaab and pirates are dangerously close to your Lamu port. Dangerously close. You make that distance extremely short. Number three, today as we speak, there are campaigns in Jubaland, which is the land bordering Kenya and Somalia. It's the last federal state before you get to Kenya. Now, for the last 4 years, we've enjoyed less Al-Shabaab attacks. I'll tell you why. Because Madube, who's been ruling that place, is someone who's been fighting Al-Shabaab for the last 10 years. If he loses that election, it means Al-Shabaab has effectively won. Okay? And one in a state where we also have a maritime dispute. So, what is the net effect of having our military on that border? Number one, the ICJ is not a court that is devoid of reality. It must rule on the basis not just of law, but on the basis of stability, in the basis of fairness, in the basis of what is right for the region. Now, what is right for the region is for Kenya to impose itself on that border and show that it has the might to take care of that border, to show that it has interests to take care of on that border. That is very critical. Number two, and this is, it cannot be understated, that if Kenya does not take such a position, then we stand to be bullied for the rest of our lives by all of our neighbors. Because let's not forget, we've got Elemi Triangle towards the northwest. We've got Migigo Island in Uganda. This is a precedent setting for this country. And if we do not take the time to do this, and I think Parliament has taken too long to do it, we should have done so sooner. Finally, in the South China Sea, the ICJ ruled a certain way. The Chinese told them they can take a very long walk off a short pier and continued on their claim. Why? Because the ICJ does not have the ability to enforce whatever they rule. At the end of the day, the best way for these things are negotiated across Africa is country by country. So why Somalia, which by the way has one of the largest coastlines in the world, which is almost 10 to 15 times bigger than Kenya, why are they fighting for what is relatively a small space of Kenya? I'll tell you why. Because their president is half American, half Somali. Their foreign minister, half Norwegian, half Somali. So in short, the Somali government is a war between the Americans and the Norwegians fighting over the oil blocks in Kenya. That's the issue. That's what they said. That's the bottom line. Yes, Philip.
First, you've raised a very important issues that most Kenyans don't think about. This is about our territory.
Yes.
This is about our sovereignty. And I would add Kenyans out there to be patriotic. This is where we talk of for God and country. This is where Americans talk about for God and country. We have to be patriotic on this. You know, the other day when this debate sprang up, I saw some Kenyans arguing for Somalia. I wondered I mean, where are you from?
Basing on the law.
No, it's not about the law.
I'll tell you, give me an opportunity to
if I may borrow one of your phrases, wars have been fought over less. Britain went to war with Argentina over Falklands. Falklands is in Argentina. Britain went to war with Spain over the rock in Gibraltar. Why? To safeguard its territorial integrity. And I urge Kenyans once again, let's be patriotic about this. So it is about our borders. It is about our resources. And it's not, you know, like Mark has pointed out again, should we cede the ground on this, we lose our coastline, we lose our access to international waters, and not just that, we lose our access to a lot of resources that we badly need as a country in order to
he's not there. Just one more minute.
Just one more minute. For me, the military option is on the table, very much on the table. Should it come to that, then we should tell the world this is our home, and we are ready to defend it at all costs.
Okay, Ruth.
For me, my question would be, what the people we are planning to go to war with, as these two gentlemen are trying to force us towards that direction, what do they have to lose? Somalia is a country that has been living in instability for over 30 years, and that is their default setting. We as Kenyans have struggled for the past, I think, 15 or so years with Al-Shabaab, and it has been a war that, to be honest, let's not lie to ourselves, in as much as we want to be patriotic and portray our country as strong and independent and surviving and thriving out there, we seem to have been losing on this war, because a lot of terrorist attacks that happen in Kenya, you know, because of Al-Shabaab, that basically is based in Somalia. So what does Kenya stand to lose? Kenya stands to lose a lot in terms of business, first of all. We are forgetting that in as much as it is just a coastline.
Stand to lose if we cede ground or if we deploy?
If we cede ground, we stand to lose. If we deploy, we stand to lose. So there needs to be a diplomatic way of resolving this issue. And for me, in my view, this also brings me to the question that
although
what do African countries... Yes, we have tried, but it is not all lost. We have not exhausted all the options. And that's why, for me, I would be very apprehensive when it comes to us saying that let's go to war. Because remember, we are not talking about foreigners who do not live in our country. We live with the Somalians themselves within this country. When terrorist attacks happen in this country, the people who propagate these terrorist attacks within the malls, that, you know, the malls, the universities, and all the places that terrorist attacks have taken place, are people who are Somali citizens living in Kenya. So let us be very careful before we advocate for war in this case. And I would like to bring us back to very many years ago, before my own parents were born, when Idi Amin was claiming literally almost half of Kenya, when he was saying, you know, he wants to take over the Kisumu all the way up to Nakuru. How did Kenyatta deal with that? Let us try and draw back from, you know, how we have dealt with such issues in the past. And please let us not be quick to run for war, because I'm sure if today we were to say, let us be patriotic, as Magali is saying here, he himself would not leave his house and go and fight the Somali people. He would take care of his own interests.
All right. Yes, respond and closing remarks.
Let me advise my young sister here that in the 60s we fought a war with Somalia for a very long time called the Shifta War, because they claimed part of Kenya. Now, if we did not take that stand today, she would be living in half a country. So let's be clear that every inch, every centimeter of this country must be protected, because this is a sovereign land that we must protect. And number two, let me teach her a bit of diplomacy. When the Americans are having negotiations with Iran, so that you remind Iran who you are, you send a few warships near them to tell them, listen, this is our capacity.
We have.
Listen, it is the same reason when you go for your interview, you borrow a Mercedes from your friend, and you borrow a suit from your friend, and when you show up, they know you're a serious person. So Kenya deploying on the military, on the border of its military, it's part of diplomacy. They must understand that we are not weak-footed, we are not going to pussyfoot about it, we are going to take a stand, and if you dare cross the line, we will make sure. That is diplomacy. And it's called aggressive diplomacy. Free education.
All right, I need to hear from Dr. Mutie. Yes. I need your closing remarks.
Thank you so much.
Gentlemen, Mutie.
Thank you so much. I think we need to be alive to the fact that once we subscribe to the ICJ as a state, as an international law person, a state is an international law person, you are bound by the provisions of that statute of the ICJ. And when Kenya did this, it actually, you know, gave its sovereignty in a way that it's able to allow the ICJ to wade in matters of dispute with an non-member state of the Commonwealth. That's why I want to educate Mark a little bit about why Kenya and Uganda never went to the ICJ. Because in 1964, when Kenya subscribed to the ICJ, it also gave some provisions that we are not going to take our member partners within the Commonwealth to the ICJ. And that's why Kenya and Uganda will never find their space in the ICJ for dispute like that one. But because Somalia is not a member of the Commonwealth, that's why Kenya and the Somali can square it at the ICJ. About the shifter wars, why they ended. This was what in law we call, international law we call irredentism, where a country can claim a portion of land to an extent where its inhabitants are up to. For example, Somalia was actually eyeing the portion of land where Somali origin fellas are inhabiting. To that extent, that's why they were claiming the northeastern region, all of it. That's what we call irredentism. So going forward, I think for me, as I was saying, Kenya tried to go by the way Mark is saying, that we go to war. We station our, hardware there to show might. That's not the solution. Because if you have subscribed to pursue legal mechanisms, including alternative dispute resolution, which Kenya is claiming the MOU, then why would you actually now take another political angle and deploy machinery when the matter is still alive within the ICJ?
But one might argue that Somalia have gone ahead and started auctioning what is still
even
before
the
court.
case is
So they're also
determined.
taking steps towards that. So do we just sit back?
For me, there is no any other solution. There's only one solution, and that is that is our land.
Will you fight?
And any other outcome to me is unacceptable. I'm ready to fight. I've fought over less things, like Mark usually says. I've fought over much lesser things.
No, but
Mark, you gave your closing comment.
If on analysis we are going to lose the legal battle at the ICJ,
Which we are likely to.
Which we are likely to, then I would urge the government to withdraw its defense in that particular matter, and rob ICJ of legitimacy. Because otherwise, if we go all through to the end, then we get a judgment against us, then it's at that point that we decide to act. We would have a legitimate, Somalia would have a legitimate argument against us.
ICJ.
How do we rob ICJ legitimacy? You cannot do that.
You can if you don't take part. That is what we call cultural imperialism, where a few countries come up with a court. Why isn't the court in Nairobi? Somewhere, just like
he's right. Actually, it is imperialism. The ICJ was set up to make sure that the way rich countries sort these problems is different, and they only decided to sort it this way to affect poor countries, so that those rich countries could exploit.
If we wanted, yes,
right,
if we wanted,
I'll need you to close for us. I'll need you to close for us. The lady gets the last word.
Today, I will close for this panel by insisting on the creation or the establishment of a new economic regime to protect the young people and to ensure that unemployment is resolved in this country. Kenya leads at 17.3% unemployment as compared to 6% unemployment rates in East African countries, that is Uganda and Tanzania. And we need to have a radical shift in the way we run our economy to be able to sustain employment within this country and support businesses within this country. And my proposition is that the government needs to adopt a new system, a new economic system that has respect for private property, that promotes and protects innovation, because we've seen a lot of young people coming up with innovations and inventions that at the end of the day they do not make anything out of because of bigger players within the industry basically how do I put it, misusing them or taking over the ideas for lack of protection of intellectual property, lack of a proper intellectual property protection regime in this country. And we also need an economic system that detests and fights corruption to the core, because as has been discussed by this panel, corruption is one of the greatest impediments to growth and unemployment, as well as a host of very many other issues. And finally, we need an economic system that promotes competition, healthy competition within the economic system. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mark Bichachi, Ruth Ambogo, Dr. Mutie, and Philip Magal, thank you for joining us this morning. And, articulating quite a number of things there, but that's where we have to wind up because of time. We'll take a short break. Do stay with us. Morning Express continues after the break.